All right, yeah, I guess we can get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Andreas Nilsson. I work as a designer at Red Hats. Yeah, during my day-to-day work, I work on a product called Cockpit, which is a server administration UI. But I've also been involved in the GNOME project for about 10 years now. And today I'm going to talk about one of the GNOME apps called GNOME Maps, and how we used interviews to implement a new functionality in that software. So it started when Marcus Lundblad, one of the developers, he found this bug, and he said, like, yeah, we should probably get some support for public transportation, because currently we have that you can get from point A to point B either by walking or biking or driving. But he was like, well, what if someone wants to take the bus, right? So yeah, we would need a design for this, and I thought, yeah, this should be fairly straightforward. So I grew up in a very small village in the countryside of Sweden. It's called Bäckamund. About 100 people live there. I didn't grow up there. I grew up like up there, so it's like quite far away. Like it takes you 2 kilometers to get even to this place, where the bus goes 3 times a day if you want to get somewhere. And these days I live in the central Gothenburg, Sweden's second biggest city. And I have a bus or a tram if I want to go somewhere about every 3rd minute, just outside my door. So I felt like, well, this should be easy. I knew both extremes of this, right? I've been living in a place where it was very few buses and trams, and I lived in a place where it's like a lot of trams, and maybe I took a bus in Paris at some point also. So I should know all this, and I would just need to use my regular process of going from idea, making some basic like ideas of who would use this, make mock-ups, and then do the code, and also look at, like, oh, how is other software solving this problem. That should be easy. But then I did the mistake of talking to my girlfriend about it, and she is born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. And we talked about public transportation in general, and it turned out that we had very different experiences and expectations of how one would use public transportation in general. So it seems like I actually had a blank spot here. I mean, I knew how I use public transportation, but I actually don't know how others use public transportation. So I had a problem. So I was like, okay, how do I solve this? How do I address this problem of a great black hole over here? I had read a little bit of literature before about doing user research, but I was always a bit afraid of it. I was always a bit intimidated by it. I felt like, well, if I would do this, I would probably do it wrong, right? Because I wouldn't ask the right questions, and I would just screw up the data, and it would just be terrible. But I felt like, well, at this point, I should probably just try it once for all, right? And even if I do it with just a couple of people, I don't have a sample group of 100 or something like that. At least if I get to talk to at least a couple of other people, then that would be better than just basing the data on one person. So I called up some friends and family from different parts of Sweden, and I called some people in Brazil, and I just asked them some very simple questions. And these were all like my friends and family, so I totally understood that, okay, yeah, this is not the best selection of people necessarily, but this is what I have, right? These are the people that I have access to. Yeah, so I asked them these very simple questions. I mean, the top one, as they talked about in the earlier talk, is a total closed questions. But the other ones I tried to make fairly open. So for example, the top one is like, do you own a car? Which is the question is, are you only dependent on public transportation when you need to get somewhere? Like intensity of usage, what apps or website you use today, which is a good way of figuring out, okay, what other kind of software can I look at? So I got a lot of tips on different apps people used, what they disliked about those particular applications, and what they liked about those. One was regarding, do you value shorter travel time or less switches? Which is a weird question, right? And some people struggled with that. But that was also in order to figure out, like, oh, a sorting algorithm for the different results. And a bit of my walking between the stops, also a sorting algorithm thing. And do you prefer a certain mean of transportation? Do you like to ride trains more than you like to ride buses, maybe? And also the question with regard to if arrival and departure, like when that is important to you. Yeah, so I just call up these people. It was fairly short interviews, maybe like 10, 15 minutes tops. And yeah, just ask them these basic questions, and it was quite good because like once you got them talking, like they were happy to share a lot of their general experience around these. And they were telling like, oh, I go from home and I take these trips every day, and I have these challenges when I'm doing these trips. And with regards to, I asked one of my friends, well, do you prefer a certain mean of transportation? And she answered like, well, I don't prefer it as so much that I simply cannot take buses. It doesn't work for me because I get really car sick, even on like I have to take the trams. And I was like, well, how car sick do you get? And she was like, well, I get so car sick that I just faint. So buses doesn't work for me, right? So suddenly it occurred to me that this wasn't so much of a preference as like such a basic need for her to be able to sort out, yeah, in this case, buses. Because yeah, any kind of results of buses would just be useless for her. It would just clutter up the whole interface. So that was revealing, and I learned a couple of other things as well in a similar vein. So what I did once I had talked to these people, I wrote it all down, like all the results. I put them out on our wiki, the GNOME wiki, and shared it with Marcus again, the developer. And then I tried to summarize the data, and I did this in the form of personas then. And all of these, as you can see, like they are combinations of data that I got out of the interviews. All right, so here's one of them. This is Jenny. It's a little bit of like just background, which is like, okay, she's new in the city, right? She can't find her way around. And then like a small little story for her, and a specific scenario that she needs to carry out, like that a person would need to carry out with this kind of UI. But most importantly, she gets car sick very easy, so she, yeah, wants to avoid to go by bus, and that I lifted directly from this friend of mine. And the friend that mentioned the car sickness, she was not the only one. That also happened to another person, but she was the one that had it most severe. All right. And after that was done, and Micah said like, yeah, this is totally fine. Yeah, these things, they make sense. I then went and implemented the UI, and or I did the wireframes, right? And yeah, and then I basically used the things that I learned. So it has this simple little thing where you can sort out certain means of transportation. For example, if you get very car sick, right? So that then matches the gender persona. You get results here, and at the beginning, if I had done it like without doing these interviews, I would not have included the numbers of the buses here, because I was like, oh, you just go in and shouldn't clutter that too much, the UI, right? But I figured that a lot of people are actually, they know their city that well that they know, like, oh, I know where I can find tram number 8, and I know how to get between the end station of that to number 3, right? I know where I need to switch. And also the leave now is the default, and it has a drop down for arrive by, because it made sense as a default. All right. Yeah, and then yeah, I talked again to Marcus. A very important thing I feel in general is that the designer and the developer needs to have a constant collaboration. It can't be that you drop this perfect thing and then you hand it off and then you back away, right? That's not my style. So yeah, he implemented it, and once the implementation was in fairly good shape, I checked out the branch, and then I invited some people over to just do some very basic usability testing on this UI, and we wanted to try if I could carry out these actions. And I did this over, like, maybe I did like a person every other day or something, 5 people in total. And as we found issues, I reported them to Marcus, and he was able to fix them before the next person would try it out, so that people wouldn't run into the same things over and over again. And yeah, that's it basically. The whole thing wasn't just built by me and Marcus, but it was actually built like by all these people who was kind enough to offer their time to do the interviews, and also the people who were kind enough to help with the usability testing. So yeah, I guess in the end we were quite a bunch of people who were involved in building this interface. And yeah, I think that's it for me. If you have feedback about this talk, good or bad, just go to this URL and submit some feedback. And that's it for me.
Any questions for Andreas?
I have one. So you basically did your entire user study on a relatively small number of people, right? And since you don't really have any data on like how representative a lot of those things are, like how do you evaluate whether that thing about car sickness is like something that just by chance one person has that you know, like maybe nobody else?
Oh yeah. So the question, yeah, I see what you mean. So I'm gonna repeat the for the camera. So the question is, since I only since my sample was only 6 people, it could be the issue that, for example, with car sickness, that it's I actually happen to run into the one person that has this like very weird, because I'm not saying that car sickness is one of them, but it could be that you get very skewed data because the sample is so small, right? Yeah. And I think that is totally true. But at the same time, I think it's better if you go out and at least get some data, and at the same time being aware that, okay, I only talked to 6 people, could be totally off, but at least I spoke to 6 people about it, you know? And then hopefully this is not a done thing, of course. I would love to interview more people. I think also that, yeah, since these things take a bit of time, right? It took me like at least 15 minutes for each person, and then I also had to talk to them a little bit before, and so maybe it's 20, 25 minutes in total. It takes a lot of time, right? So ideally, I as a designer on the team should not be the only one that does this, but ideally also other people could help out with this. The developers could also be involved in doing the interviews or in doing the usability testing, because then you're able to multiply very easily.
There's another question there on the right hand side.
Yeah.
When did you do the usability testing? Before implementation or after code implementation?
During code implementation, in the sense that Marcos had done a branch where the basic functionality was there. Not everything, not all the details were in their final state, but it was good enough that it was functional enough that people could actually start using it. And then that's where we started doing the whole thing. And we picked up on very specific things which would have been hard to find otherwise. Like, it had certain focus issues which we had to work out, which is just like, it's such an embarrassment when you sit there and taking notes and you're like, the focus shit, okay. And then, and also in the sense that people use the map itself and not so much the sidebar. I can show here. They would like right-click on the map and like do different action there, which was also something I had missed completely. So that's also something we did. But it was good. It was good because then, yeah, if we had gone on to a weird path, it would not have been like 35 coding hours invested in that for nothing.
Just in general, this is now fully complete or still work in progress?
This all is. Well, I have at least 3 minutes. I can give a little demo. Let's see. How do I get the mouse on the right screen? Is good, right? All right. So I want to get from ULB to Rue. Oh, I'm just gonna butcher it if I say it wrong. Is it connected properly? It's taking a little bit of searching, unfortunately. All right, so from here, and then, oh, it was the Rue Bronze. Wow, what's up with that? It is not in master yet. UBL, right? ULB. And here, right? And yeah, here we get the results. Well, it's broken. I'm so sorry.
Also for demo.
It is. I should have recorded the whole thing, right? Okay, here you have the sidebar. You get the different results. Okay, if I select to go with numbers 25, oh yeah, I get the stations in between, which is an expandable little thing, which is good if I'm new in the city, because I need to, what is the station before the station I need to get off, right? And I also get walking instructions for how to get from the subway to the street, and then the arrival time. And then I can go back. I can choose the different, to sort out ferries. There wouldn't go any ferries there, but in some cities. Yeah, so that's it. I can also load later alternatives. Okay, I can go at 16:45. And yeah, that's how it works.
You deserve some applause.
Thank you.
Where do you get the data?
From a project called, so the question was, where do I get the data? There is a project called Open Trip Planner, which is an open source project.
Okay.
And there is a couple of cities that has their data in this kind of formats. We currently have a test server up and running. We need a proper server, which we would host ourselves. We haven't solved that yet.
Any other questions for Andreas?
It's all good, I think.
No?
And I'm out of time.
Woo!